2022.
Mr. Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Here.
Ms. Materney,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Van Huzen, Mr. Weber.
Here.
Thank you. If you're able, please join me in standing the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes of the January 4th, 2022 meeting. Thank you, Mayor. I do have the copy of the meeting minutes here without any objections or possible changes. I will go ahead and move that the meeting minutes held on January 4th, 2022 be approved as written and dispense with their reading.
I second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen, Mr. Weber.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
He was, yes. Letters, communication, and citizens' concerns. Seeing none. Administrative reports. I have no report. City Administrator,
No report?
Finance Director,
No report.
Law Director.
No report.
Excellent, but she does have one computer, so well done. Thank you, and my water, even better.
No report. It's in the
Oh, I can-
fire, please.
Oh, I left it aside there.
Yep.
Thank you. President of Council report. Thank you, Mayor. I have no report today. Our first round of committee meetings, Finance and Economic Development.
Well, all right, you have your first report for the night. Thank you, Your Honor. Finance and Economic Development Committee met on January 11th, 2022. The meeting was called to order at 5:30 p.m. by Chairman Mark Weber. Committee members present were myself, Tim McCarthy, and Jonathan Smith. Also present were Bridget Cavett, City Administrator, Amber Rathburn, Finance Director, Kayla Trego, Deputy Finance Director, and Steve Bronder, Income Tax Commissioner. There were no objections to the minutes of December 21st, and they were approved 3-0. And discussion of food truck fees. Rick Ruffner, who owns several businesses, including Oh Dear Diner, was present and spoke. And while he does not want to ban food trucks, he wants to see more fair competition in terms of food truck fees. There was much discussion between Mr. Ruffner, the committee members, and the administration. I stated that I do not necessarily disagree and that I am in favor of looking into this matter further. Mr. Bronder stated that a letter of good standing from the tax commissioner is necessary in order to be eligible for a food truck permit each year. Mr. Smith suggested the possibility of two different food truck fees, a lower fee for Perrysburg businesses and perhaps a higher one for non-Perrysburg businesses. Mr. McCarthy does not want to run food trucks out of Perrysburg if the fees were to be too high. He thinks that we should look into the cost to the city for permitting, the permitting process to help the city determine a fair fee. I said I want to do what it takes to keep Perrysburg small businesses operating and possibly revisit the rules about food trucks being allowed to set up in front of a competing restaurant. In the establishment of state and federal grant funds, Ms. Rathburn stated that they would like to establish two grant funds, one being for federal and one for state. She also stated that recently she spoke with the law director who felt that we already have sufficient authorization to set up these funds from a 2019 ordinance passed by City Council and in the Ohio Revised Code. There is no action needed on this matter. However, she wanted to make the committee aware of this. It was about, since it was on the agenda. On the establishment of special revenue fund, city employees are paid every other week, meaning that there are typically 26 pay periods in a year. Ms. Rathburn stated, however, that every 11 years there are actually 27. So the next year this will occur will be 2031. She'd like to divide this out over the next 10 years, saving 1/10 of it every year so that we wouldn't take a big hit in the budget in that 1 year. This new fund would also be used to set aside funds to pay for employee payouts of unused sick, vacation, and compensatory time paid when employees retire or resign. Ms. Rathburn would like this matter to be an emergency measure so it can be presented in the amended budget. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to City Council. Authorization of expenditure of funds for public purpose. Ms. Rathburn stated that this is a housekeeping measure, and it is to document what the Auditor of State and Attorney General require. The Attorney General opinion states that coffee, meals, refreshments, and other amenities are fringe benefits which may properly be provided by units of local government to their employees as a form of compensation, if authorized by the officer or body having the power to fix compensation of such employees. Mr. Smith was curious how often this is utilized. Ms. Cabot answered that on an annual basis, the only time this is done on a large scale is for the boxed lunches for all the employees around Christmas time. Mr. Smith's only concern is that something like this being abused. But Ms. Rathburn will be monitoring expenditures to be sure that is not the case. Mr. Smith wanted to know about the possibility of the city earning credit card rewards or cash back. Ms. Rathburn stated that with the new software, she wants to begin paying more invoices electronically and possibly with credit cards, those rewards would then be credited to the general fund. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to City Council. Amending the general fund reserve policy, this allows the city to move 5% of the general fund revenue every year into a reserve fund. The target balance is currently 15% of the prior year's expenses. After looking at this, Ms. Rathburn recommends and prefers that we would just change this policy to be 3 months of the prior year's general fund's expenses, allowing us to get through a complete quarter of the year in the event of an unforeseen emergency. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to City Council. Updating the code language to be gender neutral. This is to update code language to be gender neutral using they or them instead of he or she, or his and her. That the committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to City Council. Transferring the deeds of the cemetery. In 2002, the Fort Meigs Cemetery purchased the property adjacent to it and took out a loan through the township. The loan has been paid off for 3 years, and the land needs to be transferred back into the cemetery's name. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to council. The quarterly income tax review, Mr. Bronder stated that we ended 2021 with $21.8 million in income tax collections for the year. We are up 9.4% from the calendar year 2020. He stated that we were seeing increases across the board for all 3 account types, individual, net profit, and withholdings. Mr. Bronder added that he is cautious and budgeting for $21 million in 2022. There are still many unknowns regarding tax revenue, including implications of the COVID pandemic and businesses that have employees working from home. The Finance Director's report, Ms. Rathburn reviewed expenditures over $5,000, as well as health insurance funding with the committee members. In other business, Ms. Rathburn stated that back in December, the police department received $363,603.82 for equitable sharing funds from the federal government. This is a forfeiture money they received due to being involved in investigations. The budget was already passed when we received these funds, and the funds must be used for law enforcement only. Ms. Cabot added that unfortunately these funds cannot be used on items that were already budgeted for. Chief Jones has requested that these funds be appropriated for equipment and training. The committee agreed 3-0 to recommend this to City Council. Also in other business, I stated that I would like to see August added to the music at the music in the park and Wednesday afternoons at Woodlands. Currently, we are budgeted for the months of June and July. Ms. Cabot stated that there is a proposal that would be in the amended budget for the month of August. Actually, as long as the mayor gives his blessing, it can be forwarded to City Council.
Mayor's gave it his blessing the other day.
All right, there will be no further business. The meeting adjourned at 6:42 p.m. All right, and here we go. I have 6 pieces of legislation introduced, with the first 2 being housekeeping matters. I'll introduce them together, and then the other 4 individually. So I would like to introduce ordinances 2 and 3-2022 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for their readings by number and title only, and to dispense with the 2nd and 3rd readings.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 2, 2022, authorizing all actions necessary to establish a special revenue payroll and payout reserve fund. Ordinance 3, 2022, an ordinance amending ordinance 142-2012, authorizing all actions necessary under RC 5705.13 to create a reserve fund and a reserve fund policy.
I move that ordinances 2 and 3-2022 be passed.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes. I would like to introduce ordinance 4-2022 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen? Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 4-2022, amending ordinance 54-2021 to amend appropriations for current expenditures and other expenditures for the year ending December 31st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
I move that ordinance 4-2022 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
I would like to introduce ordinance 5-2022 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Discussion?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 5-2022, an ordinance amending the City of Perrysburg codified ordinances to allow for the use of gender-neutral language.
You are the only participant in the conference. Please press any key on your keypad to remain in the conference.
I move that ordinance 5-2022 be passed.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, I just said, the way that the resolution or the ordinance is written in this manner, I guess my initial question was this doesn't affect any historical character within the ordinance. I think I had asked this question to Kate. Did you happen to find anything?
I have found, so my understanding was that you were concerned if, say, we have an ordinance specifically referencing the Commodore Perry, that he should be referred to as he. I've been through the ordinances, not with fine tooth comb, but pretty extensively, and have seen nothing that would cause me to believe that that's in the in the codified ordinances. So I understood your concern, but there's nothing that I have seen that is in the codifieds that would be.
Well, wouldn't that also be a proper noun as opposed to just the
generic he's and she's?
he or
Yes.
she?
So I'm hesitant to put into it a subsection that says unless a proper noun, because I don't want them interpreting proper noun one way or another. But we can put in the email. So the intent here is for all generic he's and she's. For instance, if the law director says he shall, it'll say they shall instead. And we spoke with our publishers of our codified ordinances, and they said that we could do this in this manner. We can always include in the email to them, the intent of this is not to change any proper nouns to he's or she's, and I'm sure that they will be able to understand what our intent of this ordinance was, or this resolution was.
Okay, and the publisher will also make, I guess, any grammatical corrections, because I guess I did look at some of the ordinances and the way that's worded, like he or she. If you were to place they, it doesn't always necessarily apply.
Correct, yes.
That's just understood.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the indication we were given. We will, yes.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is anytime, and I may mention this to Kate, personal level, that, anytime you blanket anything, especially going back historically to ordinances that have been in place for quite some time, I always proceed with caution. So I just want to make sure I ask the right questions.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion? If not, roll call.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
I would like to introduce Resolution 1-2022 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Resolution 1, 2022, a resolution authorizing the city of Perrysburg to transfer by limited warranty deed 6 parcels of land currently owned by the city of Perrysburg to the Fort Meigs Cemetery.
I move that Resolution 1-2022 be passed.
Second.
Discussion?
And appointed by the city council to be on the board, so.
I know, but you're still,
That's
I would suggest you recuse.
that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, even though we're appointed from the same body.
Right, but that goes to the, I'll talk to you after, but you're better off.
Oh,
You're better off recusing yourself.
No, that's fine. So should I withdraw my second then, since I probably,
Yes, please.
I'll withdraw my second to that.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Smith?
Abstain.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
yes.
All right, last one. I would like to introduce Resolution 2-2022 and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only and dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Resolution 2, 2022, a resolution authorizing the expenditures of public funds for a public purpose and declaring an emergency.
I move that Resolution 2-2022 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second.
Roll, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen? Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
All right, the next meeting for the Finance and Economic Development Committee is Tuesday, February 8th at 5:30 p.m. That's the end of my report.
Did you kind of roll, didn't you?
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? I don't expect you to answer, but maybe you
Oh,
can, Ms. Rath, can give info.
yeah, I'm sure she'll have a better answer than me.
When they talked, when he said he was budgeting 21 million, or is that because he's worried about inflation?
I think it's more the unknown of revenue coming in due to COVID and people working from home and the rules that the state has in place for that. We don't have a good way to estimate how that's going to affect us. So we're monitoring that quarterly and we'll stay on top of it, but we just want to be conservative.
And he's not thinking of maybe the inflationary factor?
Could be part of it.
Okay. Well, no, I'm thinking he should be.
If I remember correctly, I think the primary was the work from home, because that the requirement to withhold from their normal work
Many
in
unknowns.
place is not going to be here for 2022.
Right.
So if someone lives in Maumee, they're not going to be, we have to send money back to Maumee if we're withholding, if I remember.
We would refund to them and then they would be required to pay in their
Yes.
sample amount.
So if we're withholding for someone, let's say that's working in Owens, Illinois, and they live in Maumee, we are required to refund them the
Right.
full withholding.
But conversely, if they work usually in Maumee, but they're working from home in Perrysburg, we keep it.
Yeah, we
Correct.
discussed that.
We do not know the potential consequences of that, so we're planning conservatively.
Yeah, no, I'm more concerned with the inflationary factor. But, sorry about that.
No, it's good stuff. Okay. Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Safety Committee does not have a report. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 25th at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Recreation.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have a report. Our next scheduled meeting is February 8th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
Planning and zoning.
Thank you. We met on January 12th at 5:30 p.m. Present were myself, Barry Van Huzen, and Corey Coleman. Also present were Kay Sandretto, Cody Walters, and Mark Eastman from the Planning and Zoning Department. There were no citizens concerned. The minutes of the November 10 meeting were approved. And then Brody began the discussion of our land use plan, which the consultant believed to be in the final draft format, and he gave a brief explanation. There was a lengthy discussion between the committee members, the administration, and residents of the Heights concerning an updated drawing of the treatment of the Heights in the plan. Leah DeLeo Ponce, a resident of the Heights, called attention to the road that runs north and south in the plan and wanted to know if the city would use eminent domain to complete that road. Mr. Coleman stated that the city does not have the desire for eminent domain to take place. Several residents objected to the conceptual drawing of the Heights as it allowed some commercial development, although the extent of that development is limited. Mr. Easterling made the point that as long as residents do not sell their land, this will not happen. Mark Easterling also added the land use plan is something we have in place to protect the Heights by limiting commercial development, and the city is not pushing developers to the residents. Leah stated that residents have to go through the emotions of this situation first before they work to understand what it all means. We asked if this could all wait for March, we discussed again. There's general agreement that it could work, and it's a good idea. And in order to give residents time to have the conceptual drawing distributed to them and then talk about the new conceptual drawing. We next reviewed our favorite subject, arborvitae. Kate Sandretto reviewed with the committee for revisions of the charts. The deal with fences and walls, and then structural screens, hedges, and screen plantings. We went over that. We tinkered a little bit further with it. I mean, the charts themselves were pitch perfect, but we had some other wording things we needed to tinker with. And the committee then agreed to recommend approval to council, and that will come to you in Ordinance 6-2022. We also talked about Conex boxes, which we talked about before. They're being used as, could be used as accessory structures that wouldn't be moved and are kind of a shipping container. Billy Walters pointed out that given their size, they're relatively inexpensive. And I know he and the zoning department is concerned about seeing these things pop up as alternatives to sheds or garages or whatever. Ms. Sandretto stated she'd like to clarify the definition of such storage units and spell it out in section 1250.61, and we will take this up again in February. We then discussed the rezoning request that was subject to the public hearing in the last meeting, I believe, for a property on North Dixie Highway that changes from office and service to C4 Highway Commercial. Brody stated that this rezoning request is to simply make this property more marketable and to assign it more appropriate zoning since it fronts on State Route 25. This rezoning was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, and we agreed unanimously to recommend the rezoning to council. Finally, we talked about the storage of recreational equipment or trailers. Citizen had complained at our last meeting that his neighbor parks a recreational vehicle in his driveway in the front yard, and given where he parks it, it blocks the citizen's view down the street. We talked about how much the city can or should regulate it. Basically, the code currently provides between April 1st and October 31, recreational equipment or trailers may be stored in the front yard, side yard, or rear yard. Over the winter months, instead, it can't be in the front yard. Mr. Coleman stated that seems like more of an HOA issue than a city issue. Mr. Walters said the Planning Commission is open to reviewing some sort of proposal, but we decided to table the issue for the time being. It was more than nature of legislating, good manners, or good nature. There's no further business. We will meet again on Wednesday, February 2 at 5:30 p.m. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ordinance 6-2022, move to be suspended to allow for its reading under number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third reading. Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 6-2022, an ordinance amending codified ordinance 1250.42, fences, walls, structural screens, hedges, and screen plantings to permit hedges and screen plantings in certain areas.
All right, I was going to move that Ordinance 2022 be passed.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes. End of report.
Thank you. Personnel?
No report. Next meeting is January 25th at 5 PM. And Kate, I think I just sent you an email regarding what we talked about at our last meeting. I hope we will have it prepared by then. So my apologies to the Personnel Committee as a whole for not getting an email I should have sent about a month ago. But other than that, we're good.
All right then. Public utilities?
No, thank you, Mayor. No report at this time, and next meeting is scheduled 26th of January at 6:30 PM.
Thank you. Service committee?
I have no report, but I do have legislation to its, recommend passage. Introduced, thank you. Though my language eluded me there for a minute. Okay. I would like to introduce ordinance 7-2022 and move the rules be suspended, allow for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second, third, and reading.
Second. Roll call?
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Same.
Mr. Van Huzen?
Yes.
Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Ordinance 7, 2022, accepting streets, alleys, and green space for codified ordinance 1295.07, Summerfield Townhomes, and declaring an emergency.
I move that ordinance 7-2022 be passed as an emergency measure.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Van Huzen? Mr. Weber?
Yes.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Matroni?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Same.
You are the only participant in the conference.
That is
Please
all.
press any
Next meeting is Wednesday, January 26th at 5:30.
Any other business come before council?
Here's the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no opposition?
I did.